Recording.
Hello and welcome to the fourth and final part of our discussion on Autumn Journal by MacNeice. As I said last time, if you haven't listened to the first parts, then start with part one. Otherwise, this won't make much sense. So, we have 6 cantos left. Cantos 19 through 24. And we're not necessarily going to look at all of them in a lot of detail. I wanted to start with a quote from an essay by Ruth Holland, who refers to MacNeice's style as deep feelings urbanely expressed. So urbane meaning having or showing very polished and worldly manners. And I thought that was a pretty good quote to start with in relation to this stanza, this canto 19, the one that begins, the pigeons riddle the London air, the shutter slides from the chain store window, the frock coat statue stands in the square, caring for no one, caring for no one. And he goes on to talk about his dad. So we've just had canto 18, which is very political, and then we move on to something arguably the most, maybe not the most personal. I suppose you could argue that the cantos where he talks about his romantic relationships are the most personal, but this is about, this is more about his past. So yeah, what do you make of this one? I think it's different from the others in some respects.
I feel like it's quite, I don't know, it's not as personal as one would expect, maybe, but then we know that he was a bit frightened by his dad, or his dad's religious beliefs. But it's quite just very descriptive nature again. It was, you know, I would say that it's definitely not as personal as when he's talking about his lady friends. Yeah.
You know what I've just noticed actually, and I can't believe it's taken me this long for it to register properly in my brain. This is not about his father. Because of course his dad was a vicar, and here he's talking about, this is clearly in somebody else's voice. So a wistful face in a faded photo. Under the stairs is a khaki cap. That was Dad's. Dad was a plumber. You hear that dripping tap? He'd have it right in no time. So this isn't his dad.
Yeah, that then makes sense. Why it would be less, it would be more distant than like his personal relationships.
Yeah, so I wonder whose voice that is then.
I also wonder that. A wistful face in a faded photo. Yeah, I wouldn't even know who to guess.
Yeah, because earlier on he says, the night shift men go home to bed, the kettle sings and the bacon sizzles, some are hungry and some are dead, a wistful face in the faded photo. So I guess it's the voice of one of the night shift men. So it's interesting so he's gone from something very political and broad straight into the personal life of somebody he presumably doesn't know and is imagining what's in their head. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for him to also choose to be in the head of a night shift person, because that's very outside of what he knows.
Yeah, and it reminds me of when he's talking about ancient Greece, and he says, and lastly, I think of the slaves and how one can imagine oneself among them, I do not know. It was also unimaginably different and also long ago. He is he's gone from earlier on in the poem failing to imagine himself as somebody else, and now he is imagining their inner life, their past, you know. Yeah, that's interesting, because the overall theme I wanted to focus on for this episode is comparing the end of the poem to the beginning and how things have changed. You know, has the outbreak of war affected MacNeice sort of as a person, at least the speaker of the poem as a person, who we're encouraged to identify with MacNeice, and sort of his beliefs and how the poem goes, you know, has it affected how he writes over the course of this time as well?
I think it has, and I think he's making a point here. He's saying the stretchers run from ward to ward, the torn shirt soaks on the scrubbing board, like, and the telephone rings in empty houses and things. There's definitely some kind of something going on that he's very aware of, and that he's seen. You know, the telephone rings in empty houses. Is that from like people evacuating and moving, you know, further from London?
Quite possibly, yeah.
And, you know, obviously,
you know, why is this person remembering their dad? Because the tap's dripping and they can't afford to get somebody else to fix it. So they're remembering that dad was a plumber, and would have been able to fix it.
But it says he left 5 months gone or over. What month is this? When did the war hasn't started?
So this is happening in most likely at the end of November, possibly the beginning of December, but it doesn't mention does it mention a date? Yeah, there's no mention of dates in this one, but December begins or they mention December in Canto 20.
Right. So
yeah, Canto 20 ends with a week to Christmas. So this is probably early December or late November, I think.
Because I would say that it doesn't specify whether he's dead from, you know, maybe he went to fight, or whether he
Possibly
just died, or whether he died in a raid, or, you know, you don't know.
Yeah, so let me just check. Yeah, it was September of 1939 that World War II broke out, 1st of September. So this is not like that isn't the events in this canto are taking place too early for the dad to have died as a direct result of the war.
Right.
But certainly
it does make you wonder
other
why
problems could be happening.
Yeah, true. It does make you wonder why it's relevant, though. Like, why is he in this person's head, though, then?
So I'd argue that in terms of why the father's death is relevant, I think in any kind of time of hardship, that sort of thing is going to happen. You know, if, you know, there's going to be economic effects, there's going to be all kinds of effects of your country being at war.
Right.
And if you've been hit by those, you're going to, for example, in this case, the tap is dripping. Why doesn't he immediately say, I'll go get a plumber, as opposed to, you know, what he ends up thinking, which is, Dad could have fixed that, but Dad's dead. In terms of why MacNeice is in this particular person's head, I'm really not sure. I think in general, there's a trend from personal, he doesn't stop being introspective, but there's a trend from a general sort of like almost self-centeredness. And I don't mean that, like, not necessarily selfishness, although that could occur in places, but from a general sense of, this is a poem about him and about his life and his feelings.
Right.
The war seems to expand his awareness outwards. And he seems to be more directly invested in other people's feelings and experiences.
Right.
Because he's, you know, the people he's talked about so far, like when he's imagining, when he's talking about other people, he tends to be talking about historical or political figures in relation to himself, or romantic partners, and how he feels about them.
Right.
So he has talked about quite early on. There's let me find the right. So he talks about I'm not sure whether this is his ex-wife. I think it probably is, although it could be Nancy Coldstream, I'm not sure. In part 4, in Canto 4. And he does, he isn't completely self-centered, but he does sort of talk about, how do I put this? He isn't, it's not that he's so self-centered, he's failing to recognize her humanity or anything, you know?
Yeah.
You know, but when he describes her as sometimes untidy, often elegant, so easily hurt, so readily responsive, he means to him, right? So easily hurt by him, so readily responsive to him. Whose words would tumble over each other and pelt from pure excitement. That's more sort of about her. But he then says, I shall remember you in bed with bright eyes or in a cafe stirring coffee, etc. It's how he remembers her. These are things he's noticed.
Yeah.
And I shall remember how your words could hurt because they were so honest, and even your lies were able to assert integrity of purpose. And it is on the strength of knowing you, I reckon, generous feeling more important than the mere deliberating what to do. Like he's being flattering about her, and I don't mean that he doesn't care about her and only cares about what she can bring to him. But the focus of the poem is his own feeling about her, that what she has taught him, what he remembers about her, how she affected him. Whereas, you know, by the time we get to Canto 19, he is completely in somebody else's head. I mean, he's imagining it. But how this person's dead father affects him is completely, you know, presumably it doesn't, but it isn't mentioned either way. He doesn't sort of say, I imagine this conversation and feel X, Y, and Z about it. You know, he's in somebody else's mind at this point. Which harks back to what we were talking about last time in terms of, you know, the self in relation to other people, the self as a you know, yourself as a political being, you know, part of the polis, the city state, that you are, who you are is determined by other people, and your sort of role in the group as being defining your identity and very, very important in, you know, that is what defines morality and everything.
Yeah.
So he's kind of acting on that more strongly than he was before. But he does then go back to himself here. And I feel that my mind once again is open. The lady is gone who stood in the way so long. So I think this is the end of his relationship with Nancy Coldstream.
Right. I was going to say it's very sort of very, I don't know what the word would be. He's sort of looking back on things and sort of almost despondent. Where he says those rainbow bowls have burst, and it's just like he's like, it's sad and it's over.
And the line, when we are out of love, how are we ever in it? Now that they're no longer in love, he can hardly even imagine how it felt to be in love.
Right.
But yeah, he's gone straight from something very... He's focusing on personal details, first on somebody else's personal details, and now on his own. So yeah, should we move on to the next canto?
Yeah, I would say that the canto that we just looked at, I'd say is much more emotionally charged than
Oh yeah,
any that he's written before, I would say. And I think that's important as well in the context of looking at, you know, how war has affected him.
Actually, there's also.
He's reviewing
carry on.
No, it's okay. He's reviewing his like personal relationships, and maybe he's a lot more sensitive about how they ended because, you know, he's a lot more sensitive in general because there's so much change and so much sort of death and heartbreak and stuff that's beginning to happen.
Yeah, I think also actually what I was saying before about him being more focusing more in the poem on other people's emotions versus in at the beginning focusing more on his own. It says, "So on this busy morning, I hope, my dear, that you are also busy with another vintage of another year. I wish you luck and I thank you for the party." He does then go on to talk about himself again, but there are these lines that are wholly about her and about her experience, not about his own. Whereas so far he's primarily talked about his own experience of her.
Right.
Again, in a flattering way, he clearly cares about her. It's not that he's being selfish as a person, but his writing is self-centered. It's about his own experience. Whereas now he is talking more that, these lines, "I hope that you are also busy," is entirely for her. It's about her experience.
Yeah. Cool. Interesting.
So chapter, keep saying that. Canto 20 records a visit to the National Gallery in London. And
Nelson's column, yes.
Yes, there are various references to individual details in London. And the National Gallery is closed. But he remembers other times he's been. He talks about the paintings that he has presumably seen there in the past. And yeah, is there anything in here that you want to go over?
I think it's less. I was going to say it's less tinged with nostalgia, like his childhood schooling was, and more, more sad again. He's much more morose in general, much more like subdued in his rememberings than he was in the earlier parts.
Yeah, I'd say that we can sort of think back to the essay that I mentioned by, was it Melanie White? No, it was Teresa Bruce, that person whose name I don't know how to pronounce, who talks about the use of and the sort of collecting, the way that this poem is a collection of things. And also, because here he's collecting details about London and then about the gallery.
It's a lot less excited though. I would say, like, he's, like in the previous one it was and, but this is a lot less that.
Yeah,
like he's true. Still collecting things, but it's not as, I think you use like childlike excitement. It's not as much in that.
Yeah, that's true. It is sort of a list, You are Nelson, you've got the electric signs, traffic circles, but you're right. The syntax is a little bit less hypertactic. There's fewer ands, fewer sort of, there's more variation in the way that he writes about them, which slows it down.
Yeah.
It's less repetitive, which obviously the repetition would speed it up. So it's because it's less of that. It's slower. It takes you longer to read it. So C.D. Blanton quotes MacNeice, who wrote in 1938. So when this was started. The poet's first business is mentioning things. When a poet becomes preoccupied with looking for the essentials of poetry, he is lost. And Blanton sort of summarizes part of this. Condemned to work with the linguistic material at hand, relying on words that already bear a richer freight than any poem could harness, MacNeice's poet can only select among the prior entanglements of linguistic use that both make and unmake meanings. A poet thus turns outward, not from political comment or curiosity, but simply because words function only in circulation, in the shifting network of communal exchanges that determines the poet's own range of expression. And it is this that gives MacNeice's declaration its understated charge, the insistence that mentioning constitutes a different act than naming, constitutive of relating to or being a verbal form that expresses past completed action, rather than performative, meaningful only when attached to something named in advance. So I'd say that thing of mentioning, like, he just keeps mentioning things. He doesn't have to, he mentions Nelson. He doesn't go into detail about sort of the significance of Nelson's column or anything. He just, he mentions it and then moves on. He mentions the electric signs, he mentions the traffic circles, and we build up a picture from that. And by, as Blanton sort of points out, that, words only work in relation, words only work in relation to other words. The way that we use language is referential to other existing language. MacNeice isn't looking at things and naming them and giving them names and bestowing importance. He's mentioning them and we know what he means. So he mentions Nelson stands on a black pillar, and we know he doesn't mean actual Nelson. We know he means a statue.
Right.
We understand what it means that the National Gallery is closed. That, it is closed because there's a war, and the fact that it's closed is a symbol of culture being, or sort of popular. I don't know whether the National Gallery was free at this point, but certainly now a large number of museums and galleries in the UK are free.
Yeah.
And so museums and galleries are the way in which the average person can engage with sort of the canon.
I can't hear you right now.
The effects of the beginning of the war.
I didn't catch any of that.
Oh crap! Where did
cut out?
Where I cut out?
About the average person being able to see something.
Okay. So because public galleries like that are the way in which the average person gets an education on art and on culture more generally.
Yeah.
Because obviously we can extrapolate from this that other things, theatres and such, are closed as well. One of the effects, therefore, of the beginning of this war is a drop in availability of culture. And MacNeice doesn't need to say all of that. He just needs to tell us that the National Gallery is closed.
Yeah.
He just needs to mention that it's closed so that we can, and then we can extrapolate all of that. He doesn't give a name to this situation. He just mentions this detail and allows us to sort of follow his meaning and what he's referring to. So he then goes on to talk about, the various paintings that he has seen there in the past and the arrogant old masters, which is more references to elitism, the way he's been talking about it.
Yeah.
In relation to philosophy before. And yeah, the bit that I want to just mention before we move on is here. History has refuted them, and yet they cast their shadows on us like aspersions. Propellers on white horses, movement. Can we never forget the movements of the past which should be dead? The mind of Socrates still clicks like scissors, and Christ, who should lie quiet in the garden, flowered and flame instead. Basically, so Melanie White says about this, the ability to forget the past, which is indispensable, an essential part of living in the present, is in fact made impossible by the omnipresence of movement. Movement becomes the only reality the poet is able to grasp. So, we are like, time is marching on, we're progressing, but we still have the shadow of the past hanging over us. And in this case, he's talking about the old masters and religion and ancient philosophy. But of course, you can extrapolate that to all kinds of things.
Right.
Just as a large amount of the parts of our sort of democracy and the way that a large amount of what we think of as Western civilization that we celebrate comes from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. So does a lot of bad stuff. And, there's a lot that you could argue we would be better off forgetting, but we don't. We keep progressing, but keep learning about these old masters and celebrating them, and sort of, they keep affecting us in the present.
Yeah.
So after that, we have more politics, but also possibly the darkest aspect. Maybe not the darkest aspect. I think the darkest bit of that is the one that we talked about last time, where he's trying to avoid thinking about these ghosts. But this Canto 21, I'm not sure precisely who the you in this canto is. He's talking to another person. I wonder if it's actually Nancy or his ex-wife, because he says, "Not now, my love, but oh, my friend." Like, presumably, not now, my love, as in previously, my love, but still his friend, presumably, but I'm not sure. He says, "Can you not take it merely on trust that life is the only thing worth living, and that dying had better be left to take care of itself in the end? To have been born is itself a triumph, and it's gratitude to wait. And I know that you think these phrases highfalutin, and when not happy, see no claim or use for staying alive. The quiet hands seduce of the God who is God of nothing. And while I sympathize with the wish to quit, to make the great refusal, I feel that such a defeat is also treason. The deaths like these are lies." So he's basically talking to somebody who is, or at least can be, suicidal. So I suppose it's because it's not the saddest part, because he is saying, actually, don't do that. Like, that to have been born is a triumph, and that we should make the most of the life we have. But in this context, in the context of a war, interesting to include this at all. When it's a context where lots of people are, where there is the threat of imminent death. I'm not sure how early in the war the Blitz started, but when ordinary people are in a great deal of danger, to be talking about suicide in that context is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost his hope that we've seen throughout the entire poem, in terms of, like, he's always had his cantos have always ended on a positive and like progression for the future and moving forward and things. This is like a very obvious sign that his hopefulness isn't true for everyone currently in this situation. Obviously, this person is feeling very hopeless. And he ends on a great line too. "We shan't have another chance to dance and shout once the flames are silent." Like, he's trying to say, this is your chance to live your life, and it's not, you've got just one. I think that's
exactly.
He's ending on a hopeful point, and he's trying to be positive at the end of each canto.
Yeah, that's interesting. If we get to the so the next canto begins December the 19th, and a lot of this is about the run up to Christmas and how he's going to be leaving for Spain. So we've already talked about his relationship with Spain and the Spanish Civil War. I would just point out that he's quite positive about it.
Yeah.
I'd argue at this point. But he talks more about it in Canto 23 once he is actually in Spain. So 22, he's talking about how he's going to go to Spain. 23, he is in Spain. And, though they live upon lentils and sleep in the metro, though the old order is gone and the golden calf of Catalan industry shattered, the human values remain purged in the fire, and it appears that every man's desire is life rather than victuals. Life being more, it seems, than merely the bare permission to keep alive and receive orders, etc. He's basically, very positive about how the Spanish people are coping with the Civil War.
He's also talking a lot about sort of the normality sprinkled in with the wartime things. He's talking about there's some fighting and bombing, and then he's talking about the cock still crows or in the town centre and things like that. Like he's kind of he's kind of saying, well, there's still aspects of normality. Although I wonder why he chose now to go to Spain in the middle of a civil war. Like, what is his purpose for doing that?
I'm not sure. We could look back. Where is it?
Because it says he wants to go where it's like further south, where it's warm.
I think that is the reason. Let us
go ahead.
So he says, "Let us flee this country and leave its complications exactly where they, the devil, will take them are." And then he's going to go to France, but it's cold. And he misses one of his ex-partners.
But isn't it such
feels
a weird
lonely,
thing
and I think that's why
to go to somewhere that's in a current war and be like, yes, I'd rather be there.
It is odd. I'm not sure. I think,
because he's talking about being in the metro, like hiding underground due to the bombs and things. Like you're not escaping.
Oh, here, I suppose this could be part of it. I must go further south to see the new year in on hungry faces, but where the hungry mouth refuses to deny the heart's allegiance. Possibly he feels that people in England are being hypocritical, and that people in Spain are, while they're suffering, they're at least fighting for their beliefs. Maybe that's where because a lot of the English writers, Auden and the rest of his group were had strong opinions on the Spanish Civil War, and saw it very much as like, left wing versus right wing. It's the fight against fascism. So possibly there's that Auden went to Spain wanting to fight, wanting to help the left wing cause. Wasn't allowed to fight. I can't actually remember what he ended up doing. But he did something to help out.
Why are you getting in other people's business? Get out. It's not your business.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel like it's a very, I don't even know how I'd describe it. Like, I don't even know if it's privileged or what, but you're like, yes, I have an opinion on this, so I'm going to go and fight for the side that I think is right. Like, you're not that important. Like, just stay in your lane.
That's fair. Yeah.
Your body is not going to serve the purpose, you know? It's not going to serve the purpose, the importance you think it has. Maybe arrogant is the word. Like, and to me as well, him going there during wartime, you're taking resources from other people that need them. You're in that shelter, you're taking up space in that shelter when others need it. You're taking food, and he's like, yeah, they only have maize or grains or whatever, or lentils. Stop, you're taking that away from somebody. Like, unless you're bringing something, fair enough. You know, unless you're bringing something, you know, you're like, oh, if he was bringing more food or a supply of food that he could help support, or, you know, he had medical training that he was willing to share, completely different. You're a school teacher, my dude. What are you doing?
I mean, he's a university lecturer, but like, that's no better. Yeah.
but yeah, I'm just like, why you do that?
Fair enough. But either way, he sees himself as on one side, and says, may God, if there is one, send us much courage again and greater vision, and resolve the antimonies in which we live. And yeah, it's been commented on before. You can you know, look it up if you want to, about, you know, various people have written about his sort of the way he talks about Spain in this case, but he seems quite hopeful about the outcome of the war, which is unfortunate given how it did end. And says, he calls them the stubborn heirs of freedom, whose matter-of-fact faith and courage shame our niggling equivocations. We who only play for safety, a safety only in name. So basically, calling England and Britain hypocritical and cowardly, while he sees those on the side of the left-wing government in Spain as more courageous, as fighting for what they believe in, and you know, like, more, you know, he sees them as fighting for freedom, while his own country is well, I suppose, you know, we've been talking about, we've already had the canto about appeasement, or about the Oxford by-election fought on the issue of appeasement. We've had this issue, right, of how much is the government doing to avert the war, but also to fight in the name of you know, but also in the fight against fascism, right? So there's that. But I think you're right about, you know, he often ends on a hopeful note, and here I'd say this is the most hopeful, and in retrospect especially, section. You know, listen, a word, a challenge, and a bard, it is the cock crowing in Barcelona. Like, you know, obviously implying, you know, cock crowing implies the morning, a new dawn. That's a very hopeful image.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, the final canto is another interesting one, and it's different from the others again. It's sort of a summing up. It's not, he doesn't reach a conclusion, but he goes back and mentions various things he's already mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's I'm not sure what the word for this would be. I guess you could almost compare it. It's not really a lullaby, is it? But like, it's
fairy tale, sleepy story.
He says, sleep my body, sleep my ghost, sleep my parents and grandparents and all those I have loved most. One man's coffin is another's cradle. Sleep my past and all my sins in distant snow or dried roses. Under the moon, for night's cocoon will open when day begins. Sleep my fathers in your graves on upland bogland under heather. That particular bit so fathers in this case, in the plural, will be ancestors, or ancestors like biologically, but also sort of spiritually, like
the people that came
in the literary
before.
world.
Yeah.
So the Bogland specifically, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's. Let me just check something. This particular person would have been writing. Okay, I was wrong. Never mind. Skip that. But sort of the later on, Seamus Heaney writes about the bog bodies, all of the Irish, like in terms of like the Northern Irish landscape, specifically with reference to bogs. So that this is quite possibly a reference to Irish writers kind of before him and the Irish landscape as a whole.
Yeah.
Time, he says, time is a country, the present moment, a spotlight roving around the scene. We need not chase the spotlight. So again, thinking about.
Yeah.
So again, thinking about like time and focusing on the present, noticing details in the present moment.
I would say as well, he says, in sleep, my various and conflicting selves I've so long endured. And we do see that throughout the poem, where he's become a slightly different person. And,
absolutely, yeah.
He's kind of reconciling that and putting that and saying, yes, I'm different, and all these things I've been umming and ahhing over are resolved mostly, kind
absolutely,
of.
Yeah. But I think they're not necessarily resolved.
No,
I think he's telling them to go to sleep. He's telling them.
But I picture sleep as
resolved
settling.
in the sense of accepted.
Yeah, like they're settling in, like they're here now, and you're aware of them, and that's it. They're there. Hello, you're back.
Yes, you cut out completely.
You also cut out. Can you see me still? Yeah. I can't see you now, though. So yeah, I think that overall he's settled into what he's come to know. He's not necessarily resolved it completely, but I picture sleep as more of like a soothing, like this is happening and we're just going and relaxing into it.
Yeah, I'd say it's not necessarily resolved, but it is accepted. He's accepted that he doesn't need to. He's accepted that he is various conflicting people.
Yeah.
And he's accepting when it says, that we need not chase the spotlight. That is the present moment. We don't need to chase time. We just need to let it happen. I don't know whether he has accepted these things or whether he is writing this in order to try to accept them.
Right.
But yeah, he lists a whole bunch of things. Here, straight after sleep, my various and conflicting selves, sleep in Asclepius' temple and wake cured. So Asclepius or Asclepius, that person, the ancient Greek god of medicine, and also credited with the powers of prophecy. So that's interesting. In terms of, he's basically saying, he seems to be sort of saying, sleeping and that process of acceptance will hopefully. I don't know whether wake cured means wake less conflicting or just wake with those conflicts being less unpleasant to deal with.
Or Wake
but also
having something to do with the future. Wake having, you know, like thought of all the eventualities of where you are and where you're going.
Maybe. Or either knowing what's going to happen or accepting that you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe. I'm not sure. It's interesting.
Something that a lot of people can take away is do not hanker for the perfection that will never come, or whatever it said.
Like, where's that? And do not hanker for perfection which can never come. And he sort of, and
then he kind of does his list thing again.
Sleep quietly, Marx and Freud, the figureheads of our transition. So he is kind of seeing this as a transition from a transition of political and economic systems or states of organization. Lists a bunch of people. I looked up these last names, so I'm almost certainly pronouncing them wrong. But Cagney, I think, refers to William Cagney, film producer and actor. Lombard, Carol Lombard, an actress. Bing, Herman Bing, an actor, and Greta Garbo, an actress. That's based on like when those people were born and died, but according to Wikipedia. Like, I'm not, otherwise than that, I'm not sure. And it does say the next line is sleep in your world of celluloid, so presumably film stars, right? So it's interesting that he puts Marx and Freud right next to a bunch of film stars. That's interesting. Right. And then after that, Sleep Now, also Monk and Satyr. A satyr is from Greek mythology, which is like sort of a person who's half goat and associated with Dionysus. Cease your wrangling for a night. So basically, the monk and the satyr as like opposites.
Yeah.
Like an opposite forces sort of in your mind, like stop arguing for now, please, is what he's saying. And then he talks about his dreams, while we sleep, what shall we dream? Of Tir na Og or South Sea Islands. So Tir na Og, the Irish otherworld or fairyland or whatever. And South Sea Islands, Polynesia. So I guess that would be, like mythical far off lands or actual places that are far away from him.
Right.
It's
kind of like he's just ending. He's like what would you call it? Like cleansing. He's like letting it all out. He's like, okay, this is all the things that need to be done. These are all the things that need to be settled, and it doesn't matter what the conclusion is. We're just gonna calm it down.
And pray for possible land, not of sleepwalkers, not of angry puppets, but where both heart and brain can understand the movements of our fellows. And bear in mind, again, this is written in December, at the end of the year. So a lot of this is about next year will be better. Which, again, events of the time, that's debatable.
Yeah. But hope. He's back on his hope train. He's like, things are going to improve. Just you wait.
Yeah. And the last lines, I think, are very interesting. There will be time to audit the accounts later. There will be sunlight later, and the equation will come out at last. So, the equation will come out at last. We'll find out the answer. We'll find out what's happening at last. Not yet, but at last. And there'll be time to audit the accounts, to look over, in a literal sense, that would be income and expenditure, right? Over the course of a year. In the metaphorical sense, it could be, all of our various gains and losses. We can look at those later. We don't have time right now.
Little did he know how bad it was gonna get.
So this is a quote from John Pikulis, possibly, from 1991 about these last lines. This is a philosophy of patience and hope, a defeated sort of hope, but hope nonetheless, one that may be destroyed and reasserted at any time quite arbitrarily. At this point, MacNeice approaches the bleakness of the truly absurd, but at the last minute recoils from it. He cannot contemplate anything so finally empty as a diminishing universe, as Samuel Beckett was to do shortly after. His was an Epicureanism touched with stoicism. MacNeice was a melancholy poet, and his vulnerability and confusion are understandable, nowhere more so than when he tries to make meaning from his bundle of sticks time after time. I think that last line, time to audit the accounts, the equation will come out at last, like that he's assuring himself that there will be meaning, like a meaning will come from this.
Yeah.
Which a lot of writers around this time, and especially after the war, really struggled to find any meaning, and in some cases argued that there was no meaning because of the horrors of the Second World War, right? That you get to the end of that and go, there's no way there could be any meaning in this. We can't try to take a moral from all of this.
Right.
And these lines are kind of trusting that eventually there will be.
Yeah. And he knows it's gonna be bad when he says the new year comes with bombs. It's too late. It's too late to dose the dead with honourable intentions if you have honour to spare, employ it on the living. I think that's important. You know, honouring the dead, yes, but also, you know, be there for the living and support the living and do what you can to your, like, we're back to that sort of community aspect of, you know, we don't want to live for the individual, we need to live for the everybody else as well. And you inherently will do that because you need to, otherwise you die.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think he wants things, he knows things will be bad, but he definitely hopes that there will be a reason and things will be better.
And he's also accepting that this is the time to act. He's already said previously that now is the time to act, and this seems to be essentially, you know, he's talking about sleep, but it's like sleep all of these smaller conflicts, sleep all of the philosophies, sleep all of the
moral arguments, and
just right now we need to act on this, and we can find out later how the equation comes out. So is there anything that you want to discuss that we've talked about or that we've not talked about before we end?
Let me think about that. I guess in general, this isn't something that I would typically read or find, you know, interesting on its own, but diving into it a bit more and having that context and discussion around how it fits into the context definitely helps enrich your experience of the reading, you know, because we talk a lot about, you know, people are like, oh, they didn't intend that, they just wrote that, and you know, you don't need to look deeper than what it is. But you know, it's this, I feel like this has been more enjoyable, and it's given me more to think about by discussing it than by just reading it and being like, okay, it was a thing and I read it, because I don't think it would have impacted me as much if I'd just read it and I'd been like, okay, because it's not the sort of thing I read typically. So diving deep has really, I think, has been a very positive experience.
Awesome, that's really good. That's the aim of this kind of discussion. So do you want to talk about what we're doing next time?
I would love to, but I don't know what we're doing next time. Well, we've got some options, and for the people that are listening to this currently, we recorded these episodes a long time ago, many months ago, because Esme is off back to university. So we've kind of only planned roughly up to this point, right?
Right, yeah.
So I have a few ideas and things, but I would say look out on social media and on my website to see what's actually coming up and whether you'll be interested, because
it'll be some very interesting science topic.
It'll be, it'll
for
be
sure
some
what it will be
exciting
yet.
science. And yeah, so look out for that. There'll also be some interesting announcements coming out. I don't know when we're announcing our announcements, but I'm hoping that maybe after...
By the time this is uploaded, they'll be ready.
And when we finish, I'll probably end up recording something and tagging it on the end after this. So it'll only be 5 seconds for you, but here we are. We don't know. Current 2020 Esme and Kim don't know what the plan is yet. So,
but 2021, there will be a plan.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a call to future Kim. Kim, you need to sort that out. You need to record something and let people know what's going on. But yeah, thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed this as a series. Because obviously it's not something we've done before. So let us know if you liked the series. Let us know if you would have preferred Esme's episodes one after the other, or whether you liked it with the science in between. Just let us know anything.
Whether you just want a 5-hour podcast of me talking about autumn journal all in one go.
Yeah, of course, because I definitely could sit and do that for 5 hours. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, everybody. And that's it from us.
See you next time.